Hi there guys, I hope you are having a good day. Grab yourself a cup of tea and let's talk some boxing. Now, according to David Higgins, there are negotiations for Joseph Parker versus Derek Chisora 2. That is something that is in the works for later this year. Now, of course, there was that more or less controversial decision to give Joseph Parker the win when they fought last time in May. And it was a difficult fight for Joseph Parker, and I would imagine much more difficult than he had expected. Now, of course, David Higgins came out with all of the big talk, like Joseph Parker is ready to send him into retirement, and he was lucky to get that big punch in the first round, to get an early start, get a head start, I guess, over Joseph Parker, and that was integral to his success throughout the fight. And yes, I would imagine that getting a knockdown in round 1, that early as well, would be a great confidence booster going forwards in a contest like that, especially where he plans to smother and make it very difficult for Joe Parker to have any kind of clean work, because Joe Parker does like to do that. He would prefer to work neatly and jab here and there and make sure it's more of a boxing match than an all-out brawl. He can go there, but it takes a lot to get him there. We saw that even in the Dillian White fight. He almost had to be tempted and coaxed into having that kind of fight with Dillian White. Once he got there, it wasn't so bad for him, but for a few rounds in the middle there, he did play possum and went in his shell for a few rounds. So he clearly finds that style quite difficult, and he is happy to get back in there with Derek Chisora to prove that he is the better man, because last time around, it didn't necessarily prove that he could get a conclusive victory over Chisora. Now, he is a tough fight for anyone in the heavyweight division, but the top guys seem to be able to get the better of Chisora. Dillian White has, and so has Tyson Fury. That being said, Chisora is not an easy night for any fighter, because if a fighter struggles with that kind of style, then it's always going to be difficult for them to navigate. Now, Joe Parker has proven in the past that he would prefer to box rather than fight, and we've said it time and time again. He needs to show more dog in him. He needs to be more aggressive at times, to go after the fight and in general just show more. That was something that seemed to be apparent also in the Chisora fight. I would imagine there are some demons he would like to put to bed in taking a rematch with Chisora to prove that he can unanimously beat him or maybe stop him. I'm not entirely convinced he can stop him. He can get a unanimous decision if he boxes him a certain way, but he does need an explosive victory, and going back in there with Chisora is a dangerous task for Joseph Parker. It's great that he wants to rematch the guy who he only just beat, and for some even lost that fight, so it is admirable that he would want to get straight back in there with him to prove that he can beat him. I'm just thinking it's not necessarily a great fight for Joe Parker. I think he was kind of lucky the first time around, and maybe if he does want to go back for a world title, Derek Chisora isn't the best fight for him, because I think Chisora could beat him a second time around. That being said, I would love to see the fight again, and I definitely believe that this time around, Derek Chisora could even get the victory. I just don't think it's a smart move for Joseph Parker, because, again, I think that Derek Chisora can really get something out of this fight, and if they are planning to do it again, then great. I know that there are some other fights out there for Joe Parker that he should look at taking, especially given his position within governing bodies if he wants to get another world title chance, but I'm not entirely convinced that he's going to fight a Hrgovic or someone else. So if it's not Chisora, then what are the chances he ends up in with an opponent around the level of Shaundell Winters? Imagine if that happens instead. I know that there are other fights out there, but if they cannot get them secured for Joe Parker, then that is likely what will happen. He'll end up with a fighter like that in not necessarily a meaningful fight. At least the Chisora one is a meaningful fight. It is interesting, you know, how Joe Parker is never really mentioned alongside the names like Luis Ortiz, or maybe an Andy Ruiz Jr. rematch, maybe even a rematch with Dillian White, which I guess he hasn't really earned. So he is kind of high in the rankings of governing bodies, but he doesn't really get talked about with maybe a rematch with AJ, maybe even a fight with Tyson Fury. I know they're friends, but still, those are kind of fights that don't really get mentioned for Joe Parker. He usually ends up in the ring with fighters like Shaundell Winters, and who was that other guy? Junior Farr as well. I mean, that was a big New Zealand showdown. but still, it's not a huge fight for Joe Parker. I'm wondering if he does need to make a statement, and Derek Chisora could be that statement, but I mean, given what happened last time, do we expect anything different from Joe Parker? We've been saying it for years, there is more to see from him, but when he gets in the ring, we don't necessarily see it. We've seen it in patches, the Ruiz fight, and I guess the Dillian White fight, but they are few and far between, so he does need one performance where he stamps his authority, gets a big win, a big knockout over someone like Chisora, then he can start calling the bigger names, maybe like an Andy Ruiz, maybe even a rematch with Dillian White or Anthony Joshua, but at the moment, Joseph Parker is not mentioned alongside those names because I guess he hasn't really had that trademark fight, and that is something he is still searching for. I don't think he's going to find it anywhere else, so it seems like Chisora could be his only option of having a big fight. Aside from that, I don't see him in a big fight at all. I see him on the undercard of a different event, maybe in there with a level of opponent similar to that of Shaundell Winters. I mean, I could be wrong. They could be looking at different avenues like a Luis Ortiz fight, but I just don't see it. So if that is the case, then Chisora is the right option. It's a rematch, and what he needs to do is get a conclusive victory so there are no question marks next time. It is good that he is going to get back in there with Chisora, and negotiations are underway. That is positive from Joseph Parker, because he could just sidestep him. He could think that, okay, that was a difficult fight last time around. I don't want to risk any position within governing bodies by taking it again, but he is happy to take it once again and prove that he is able to get the victory conclusively. So that is a great move and a great mindset from Joe Parker. I'm not entirely convinced though that he can beat Derek Chisora the next time around. I think definitely Chisora can take something from this fight, and maybe that's where it's not such a smart decision because he struggled last time, and I believe he will struggle again. Anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also leave a like and grab that subscribe button. Thanks, guys.